Hello. We're going to continue our series of Java programming tutorials, and in the last tutorial, in a prior tutorial, we looked at Intro to Object-Oriented Programming. That tutorial wasn't specific to Java, it was more generically associated with any object-oriented language. But in this tutorial, we're finally going to get into some Java snippets, not complete programs yet, but we're going to see some pieces of Java that help you implement the object-oriented principles in that prior tutorial. We're going to start here with class methods versus instance methods. We were looking at the differences between class and objects in the prior tutorial. We were drawing out a class as a rectangle, and in this case, let's say we have a class called person. And then we were saying basically what happens at runtime is we kick out objects, and those are typically represented as ovals, circles, and we can kick out as many objects as we want from the class once the class is defined. When we kick out an object, we have references to that object. So let's say this is person 1, and we have person 2, and person 3. So these references point to the objects, that way we can talk to them and call them once we've created them. Now in the earlier tutorial I mentioned that the classes typically don't execute. You don't think of a class as executing at runtime, you think of the objects as executing in the system. That was a little bit misleading. It turns out classes can execute too, and that's what we're getting in this difference between class and instance methods. So it turns out that you can define a method as a class method, and there it belongs to the class, not the instance or not the object. Or you can define an instance method, and the instance methods belong to the objects. So for example, let's say we create a class method called setNationality. You think of that method in here. So the setNationality method belongs to the person class. It doesn't belong to any individual person object. It actually belongs to the class itself. And then we might create some instance methods, and those are the methods we were talking about in the last tutorial. For example, we might declare a method called sleep, and we might declare a method called walk. Maybe one's public, maybe one's private, whatever. But those methods belong to the instance, not the class. And once you declare a method as an instance method, then all objects get those methods. So sleep and walk belong to the objects, not the class. But setNationality belongs to the class. It's kind of nice to have a class method in that you can call it before any objects are created. The method is available, and in fact if it's public, if the class method is also marked public, then it's kind of like a globally accessible method. You can call it any time. And the way you call it is with the class name dot and then the name of the method you're calling. So person.setNationality will invoke this method right here, and I don't have to create any objects before doing that. I can call that method at any time in the program, whether or not person objects exist in the system. In order to call sleep or walk, I first have to create an object, at least one object, of class person, and now I can call sleep or walk, but when I call sleep or the walk method, I have to call it through the reference. So I'm going to say, for example, here person 3 dot sleep. And that would call the sleep method in person 3. If I said person 2 dot sleep, I'd call the sleep method in person 2. So those are the ways that I can invoke instance methods. It's a little different than invoking a class method. To invoke a class method, you use the class name, and to invoke an instance method, you use the reference to the instance object. So here we see some actual Java code. It's not a complete set of code yet, but we're getting there. We've got line numbers here. You don't put line numbers in your file. That's just for display purposes. And we declared a class called ball. And by using the static keyword, we declared a class method called increment ball count. And we started the method, the implementation, and we ended the method. And then we didn't put any code in the middle yet. We're just getting started with the syntax there. And then we created an instance method called bounce. So this class has one instance method, bounce, and one class method, increment ball count. So again, to try to visualize that, the increment ball count method is part of a class. In this case, we have a class called ball. And then when we come and generate objects off of this class at runtime, the bounce method is going to belong to each object. And again, the static keyword is how we know the difference. The static keyword is a holdover from C and C++. It's they decided to use that same keyword in Java, but class method may have been a better keyword choice. But that's what we're using to denote in Java that we have a class method.